go. And admitting our guest, our single guest. Hello, hello, Eric.
Well, hello there. How are you?
Where are you coming from today?
Oh, I'm in my house.
Oh,
No virtual background,
I'm
just
used to a
me.
virtual background.
I know.
Yeah, it's terrible. Anyway, welcome, Eric. You are our guest today.
It's
and
just me?
It's just you at this point.
Wow. Okay.
We are talking about improvisation, and I am super stoked because we have a semi-reunion here of a wonderful improv group that I was part of, the Flea Bitten Varmints, under the auspices of Flea Bitten Productions, which was Joe's and my company. And Jera and Aaron were both, as well as Joe and myself, were all members of this improv group that lasted for, what?
We did it for the full 5 years.
Was it the full 5 years?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. And it was great. And we went all over the place, and we occasionally had an audience, sometimes bigger than the one we have tonight. And
sometimes not.
and sometimes not. So we're quite well versed in improving for each other, which I think is the essence of improv anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just start by, well, first a little introduction, because a couple of you have not been my guests before. Joe has, so you can start, Joe. Introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Joe Hogan. I am a high school drama teacher, full-time now, which is exciting. I don't have to teach English anymore, yay. I actually am teaching a improv unit right now, and I just started last week a improv club at my school, which is very hard to do over Zoom.
Yeah, I would imagine. Kind of throws timing off. That's what I've found. Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah, and let's go to the most beautiful member of the Varmints, Jera. Would you please? I know, too obvious. Come on. Okay, what the hell? Jera, introduce yourself, please.
My name is Jera. I'm a actor, solo performance artist, songwriter who just moved to California with a lovely 3-month-old son. And yeah, improv's been a large part of
wife.
And a wife.
She's sitting there listening, and you are going to be in so much trouble later.
Oh.
Okay, and you are in Sacramento now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. And Erin, who used to be Erin Koch.
Yeah.
Now she's Erin Ventura, which honestly sounds like a porn name. I'm sorry. It really does.
True. Ventura County is where a lot of porn is made.
Although with my former last name being, when it was mispronounced, it was also
a
porn name. So
yeah.
All of my acting credits are not under this name, so I feel like I have a completely new identity. But my name is Erin. I currently am in Kansas City. I'm desperately missing performing and hoping to get back to it in the near-ish future. I have 2 little kids, so that's what I do most of the time, and work a sales job as well. But yeah, I met all these guys in Long Beach working on the Queen Mary is how I got to know all of them, and then plays and improv and everything, murder mysteries, dinners, everything in between happened. So yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, we all met at the Ghosts and Legends attraction at the Queen Mary. We were all hired as guides shortly within the same time span of each other. And I would say that probably infused us with a love of improv, because the script sucked so bad. What was your first experience in improv? Any of you?
I did improv straight out of college. I was too scared to do it in college because I went to school with Jara at USC, and the rumor was that the teacher who taught improv was great at making people cry, and I was not in a stage in my life where I felt like crying in class, so, unless it was our voice class, which was Therapy 101, and so, we had there was a improv group on campus. I thought they were amazing, but I didn't really know how I would fit into something like that. And then after graduation, I got into a group called the Berrubians, which is a terrible group. It's scary, but it was cultish. But it is where I learned how to do improv.
And just in case Chris Berube happens to watch this, we're sure it's changed.
We're positive.
We're positive. It was a fleeting moment. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, that was my introduction, and he was a very good improv teacher, so I will give him that. And yeah, I got addicted to it because it's fun. It doesn't take a lot of rehearsal. You just get up there and play, and I mean that's why a lot of us got into theater, was just to play. So.
And Erin, what was your experience with it?
I started in high school with comedy sports and did some of that, and then in college there was some, and just kind of kept on where I could, But yeah, high school was really just theater in general where the bug bit me. But comedy sports was a blast because you got to compete against all the different schools, and it was just fun. Why go to a football game when you can do improv?
Seriously.
And Jara, your experience?
My experience, I remember as a kid on Saturdays watching Ha before it became comedy TV, before it became Comedy Central.
Oh.
And watching Sprockets,
Wow.
and then watching the Upright Citizens Brigade, and then of course watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? And then from there, really falling in love with the idea of what a story can do. Then in college, Joe and I had a St. professor, Brent Blair, who utilized improv in a form of creating stories for children. And it was based heavily on Eric Johnstone and his theories of status, as well as in larger improvisation story-based telling. And then after that, I met you guys and we did improv for 5 years, and it was great. And these days, I still love improv. I love improv podcasts like Spontaneation with Paul F. Tompkins, where it's all devised on the spot with a buzzer that either goes back in time, forward in time, or the immediate present. And it's just a fascinating look at what you can do using just a few simple tools.
That's cool. I gotta check that out. So I'll start real simple. Did you have a favorite character?
Me?
Yeah, any of you.
Johan was fun. Johan was a chance to just be an aching id. Johan was the house band of basically a theme we called the Buck Feist Show, like a talk show from hell. And a friend of ours, Bobby, was the lead, Buck Feist, and then I was his co-host assistant from Zambia, because I had a perfect Zambian dialect.
It was uncanny.
It was. It's like I had seen the sunrise. But
yes.
My favorite character, who's not my own, was a character Bobby would play occasionally, called Slocum Jones, who was a hobo. And it's the only time I would break on stage was hearing him do his character while we were improvising. And he'd ask him a question. He'd be like, "Hey, Slocum, what happened to your face?" And he'd say something like, "Well, a horse kicked me because I was ugly." And everything is a derivation of that.
Yeah, it was Slocum was great just because it played to this lack of energy.
Yes.
And everything in improv is always this energy.
Right.
It's, how about you guys? Joe, Aaron, did you have a favorite?
I don't feel like I was usually that refined. Everything always, I've always played so young that there was always a lot of really young characters, really, speaking of energetic, very energetic kind of, I probably could still almost pull off a teenager.
You could.
You could.
None of us could, but
the energy at least.
how about Joe?
Well, it's funny, like talking about favorites that are not our own. I had a student who came up with, I'm sorry, my dog's having a fit. A student of mine came up with a character named Hobo Joe, and basically the entire dialogue would be mumble, 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 cardboard box, mumble, 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 food. You know, it was, and she did so much fun stuff with it that it was always a pleasure to see when she came out on stage and decided to do Hobo Joe. I think for me, it's totally not appropriate in this day and age, but back then we were stupid. I loved like interrupting stuff like rant and other things with my deaf character who would just sign very angrily. Because usually it would be, I did it a lot in rant where, you know what I hate, and then it would be why, somebody would say something and I could always pull that character out and kind of like call them out on whatever they had just said just by angrily moving my hands.
I'm gonna use that someday.
That's a good one. Speaking of things that we couldn't do today.
Like handicap.
Hey, Greg, I have a question
my
for you.
favorite character was, oh yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
When you guys say we did improv, did you put shows on? Did you go to competitions? Like, what did that look like? What exactly did you do?
It was no competitions. Did we ever do one? I feel like we were almost going to get into a competition with one of John's other
maybe we did
acquaintances or something, but we did shows. Yeah,
people don't know what improv is, and so we get hired out to do the weirdest stuff. We performed at BB King's, which was the biggest venue that we ever performed at. It was weird.
It was very weird.
We were supposed to perform at like a minor league baseball game at like in between. It was when you were back in Maine and left me behind to take care of everything, and it was a total disaster.
Joe and I did that one.
Because people don't realize that you have, like, improv doesn't fit everywhere.
No.
Like, people think, oh, you can just improv anywhere, and you can't.
No.
You can't.
There's subtleties that are missed.
Yes, subtlety is definitely missed when you're performing to a stadium full of people. That's why I stopped letting my kids perform at assemblies, because you can't, nothing translates to that big of an audience.
Right.
But what we ended up doing is we did have a theater for a while, and we were performing there every week, but then we did perform at the Queen Mary on a weekly basis. And that's when we were doing the Buck Feist show, which was basically improv games disguised as a late night talk show. And, it was fun. It was like very creative for us.
Recurring characters.
Mm-hmm. Recurring characters.
Yeah. But it's and they were all late night shows. They were after another performance that we would have produced of a legitimate show. And normally very small audiences, because most people don't want to just kind of head to the theater at 11:30 at night. So they tended to be very much like Whose Line Is It Anyway type games that we would do. We had a small following. We had some people that came back regularly, which is sort of what you depend on for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to say, that my favorite character that I did, which I could not do these days, was, and I don't remember his name. I think I remember his name, but I don't want to misstate it. Is the mentally challenged cheerleader with the anger issues?
Oh yes.
Was it Marvin? Was it Marvin?
I think it was Marvin. Yeah.
I don't even know how that one was developed, but I went back to that quite often. And he would, get into these positions where he was either auditioning for a cheerleading team or teaching cheerleading for some reason.
Why not?
And then when someone was telling him he wasn't doing it right, he would explode and usually erupt into a violent attack. And it was highly, it was even offensive then, but we could get away with it. So let me ask you this. Is improv comedy able to be done these days?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's the first thing I thought of is anybody doing it, and what's the response when you're anything but politically correct?
Well, you're going to always have a little bit of not politically correct, but I had a running, I started my drama program at my old school and had it running for 11 years on the Improv. Like, that's what started it all. And it got to a point where the kids were teaching each other. I was there to make sure they didn't set the classroom on fire. I didn't do anything. But a lot of the games that we played as Varmints, we could never play today. Like, the foreign expert just comes off as awful. Like, we tried to do that, and even the kids were like, this is not going to work.
Foreign expert is basically a gibberish game where someone is coming out to explain a topic that we get from the audience in a foreign language from a country that we get as a suggestion from the audience, and then you have a translator. And yeah, you're right. It's simply really, really not racist per se, but nationalist, I guess. I don't know what the...
No, it quickly becomes racist. It's not mince words. It quickly becomes racist.
So let's say away from high school theater, which I think you have a little more leeway because people expect you to be crossing barriers. Do you think we could improv comedy these days? So anyone can jump in on that one, because I don't know.
You
I
actually
think it's still
Greg.
I
We
think
didn't hear you.
Yeah.
You didn't hear me.
You broke up
skipped
on the
out.
question, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Right
That's
at
why we're
the
all-
meat of the question, it was gone.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that for a professional group, not an educational group, which gets some leeway, do you think a professional group could get away with doing improv comedy, knowing what an audience expects improv comedy to be?
I do. I've seen a lot of it in practice. I've seen shows like Opening Night, which is an improvised musical, or there's a group called Super Ego, which does some wonderful improv, and then they edit it down and add sound effects and music later on, and they release it as a podcast.
Oh.
And then one of the things they do is Super Ego literature classics. And for example, none of them had read The Red Badge of Courage. So all they got was the first line, the last line of the book, and the characters. And I think you can still do improv these days without leaning on the older tropes that we used to have and focus more on the narrative. And this is me, I'm about to get real pompous right now.
Oh.
So all warnings ahead. Pompous time.
It only took 20 minutes.
I know.
Time.
Yes, that's right. John Gardner, the author, once mentioned that writing should be vivid and continuous. And I think that applies to improv as well. I think the dream itself, the narrative, the story has to be vivid and full of imagination and entertain you, but it also has to have an interior logic. You can't just negate things. You can't go off into different tangents just to be random. Good improv works because it has a culture and a built-in rhythm and a sense of understanding its own world, whatever world you give it. And if that's not depicted, then you're going to watch some bad improv.
That wasn't totally pompous.
It was accurate.
It was
Yeah.
accurate. It was. Okay, so here's the next question. How often, I know the answer for me, how often do you use improv in scripted work? Aaron, jump in.
Yeah, like all the time, because even though you're memorized and rehearsed and stuff, lots of different things happen, be it, you know, unexpected stuff or just nuance. And yeah, you've got other people sometimes improvise more than you do. So you have to be able to react to that. Well, that's what I think.
Joe?
I've been accused by some of my students that have gone on to study theater in college that I am way too text analytical. So I don't use improv a lot to like come out with character, because I'm really usually asking a lot of questions. And I want to see them perform in context. I don't necessarily want them to play unless we're really struggling with a specific aspect of the character. So I don't, with directing, I don't use it a lot, just because I think, again, I work with a younger group. And so it's a very easy for that to go in directions you don't want it to go. You know, so I do like improv as its own thing. And I definitely think, I very much agree with what Jero was saying. I think that we just need to kind of think of improv in a different way. Me starting to teach and create a improv group 11 years after the last time I did it at a high school. I'm not just like, yes, and is the only rule in improv, because I want this group to really know that it's about taking care of each other on stage and creating a story. And even though my old group had days where we would just do, we are not doing comedy improv today, they would be these dramatic improvs, and sometimes you can get such good stuff out of dramatic improv. I want my kids now to go in and see this as a story form and not as waka waka waka, here's the joke, because I think that is how improv survives in this day and age, is by telling good stories and not by, I mean, you see it, I'm a geek, so you see it in like Dungeons and Dragons actual plays. Like, they've become this huge thing and it's improv, but they're telling a story within a structure.
Absolutely. Jared, anything to add? I mean, you created a one-man show.
Yeah, I've created several one-man shows, and a lot of it was based on improvisation. One was, of course, based semi-fictionally on our time working on a haunted ship, and me dealing with mental illness and falling in love and all the weird and terrible things that ensued, called Ghosts on a Stick. Yay! And for that, there was a lot of self-improvisation where I reached a point where I was only getting 10 pages. And I thought to myself, well, there's got to be more. And so I'd often just, in my own room, give myself a cue line or a point and just start recording myself talking for about 10 to 15 minutes at a time, just seeing where my mind could go. And then after that, I would transcribe, and then I would pare down, and through that, turned it into an hour-and-a-half show. And then for my other show, King of the Hobos, which was a one-man musical about hobo culture, set based on a real-life historical icon who passed away during the Depression, I've used a lot of improv there as well. For music, I would try to sit there and go, okay, realistically, what is the type of song that has to fit here? And I make several mistakes. I make choices, and I do things that were not true to the nature of what the character was, until I finally found the right song for the right context of the show. And then the newest thing I'm working on, which is a almost like a Mike Daisy based sit down experience where it's autobiographical entirely, no fiction, would be a story about my father, my late father, called 53 Knives. And so throughout that process of writing it, there's a lot of gaps. There's a lot of gaps because my father kept a lot of secrets. And I've been using improv on my own to extrapolate, do free writing, to act out what I think may have happened during those certain time gaps to help explain some of his narrative and some of his own history.
Cool.
Wow, neat.
You will be playing your own father in this?
I'll be playing me. It's like I said, Mike Daisy based, so it's just more like Spalding Gray. Sort of, I'm not playing a character, but I'll be just sitting down. And it's called 53 Knives because when my father died, and I went down to Oregon in this little compound, double wide trailer with 436 acres of basically nothing. Inside this small double wide trailer were no less than 53 knives, all sharp, all hidden throughout the complex. And the show itself is trying to understand why and describe every type of knife that was found.
Wow.
Things like tomahawks, like pen knives that were sharpened with diamond stones, Swiss Army knives, commando knives. My dad was a character.
Interesting. I would say so. All right. So here's the question to open this up a little bit more. A lot of people are scared of improv. I think we all hear it, you know, oh, how do you do that? When we would do the improv shows, people would come up afterward and say, oh, how do you get up there? How can you stand the pressure? What do you tell people?
It doesn't go away. You learn to deal with it. But there could be no reward without risk. No, you learn to work. You learn to work within it, though. I mean, if you want it bad enough, I mean, if you put me out there right now, being quite rusty, I'd be terrified. But I feel like I always did those shows, like it's like any show, improv, scripted, nothing, anything. You know, you just have to want to, and you have to be okay with failure because it's part of the process.
Yeah.
What I always tell my kids is, you know, people, or the ones that don't, like in class, not the ones that are performing, because they're fine. Teenagers have no fear. Like, you know, when they get in the groove, they have no fear. But the ones who are really worried, I'm like, look, it's improv. So the worst thing that could happen is you get up there, you do something awful, fail miserably, and everybody laughs at you. The best thing that could happen is you get up there, you perform, and everybody laughs at you. So either way, you're good. Like, there's nothing like, but the thing that I've been telling people, or starting to tell people, is when I'm doing scripted work, I'm telling people it's not about you, it's about the character. And if you're getting stage fright, it's because you're more concentrated on you than you're concentrated on a character. And I think with improv, it's the same thing, but instead of concentrating on your character, you should be concentrating on the other people in your group. Because if you're there taking care of everybody else, and you know that they're going to take care of you, that fear should start to go away. It's never going to go away entirely, because that's why we do it. It's our extreme sport.
Drug.
Yeah.
Our extreme sport.
But to that point it's when you have a good group that you've spent quality time with and you work well together, it is like a safe space. So nobody wants each other to fail. So if you are off, other people are there to like support you and kind of help guide you to where you might be on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jura, anything to add to that?
I agree wholeheartedly with what Aaron and Joe have said. I think that if you don't have some fear with any sort of artistic endeavor, to me it means you don't care enough. That there should be some sort of underlying nerves that make you realize that what you're doing is dangerous. It is. You're doing something that a lot of people can't do, and something that feels like a magic trick. And it is a magic trick. You are turning nothing into a story. And that is, on the surface of it, very scary. But I think if you just, like everyone said, plunge in wholeheartedly, make the experience about other people, offer to be in improv what's known as a passenger, which is someone who doesn't jump in and go, okay, I'm going to lead this entire scene, but is willing to be a person who makes that world even better.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's set in a restaurant, they're a customer at a table instead of trying so hard to be the lead chef or whatever. I think that sort of working together and even being able at first to be a secondary character can help younger improvers feel more at home. Because like Aaron said, you're right, it's about that family, building that family, making sure that family works together despite their own proclivities and what they like about improv.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think improv, like any theater, I mean, this is what I always teach and try to infuse in my shows. It is all about listening to each other. And that's probably the hardest thing to do, especially if you are going into pure improv, is training yourself to shut up and listen. Because it's just, there is an inherent need, I think, in most of us to get out there and take control of a scene. And it is so hard to just step back and say, someone's going to take this one and I get to follow along. But that's when it works so well. Aaron, I had the pleasure of directing you in a show, Little Footsteps. I just got reminded of it the other day because I was finally like organizing my script library. I went, oh, look at this show. I remember this. And there was a good amount of improv used in that show. I mean, it was definitely scripted, but I would say it was safe to say that it changed a lot on a nightly basis. Was that, putting you on the spot, was that a positive kind of production for you?
Yeah, it was I very much enjoyed that show. And I don't remember all the details of what sort of improving we were doing. I just remember high energy and a lot of movement.
Remember, it was very physical.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And yeah, I mean, our cast got along really well. So for me, it was also like there was a trust level, especially like with Andrew, and stuff like that. So yeah, I have only good memories of the show and enjoyed doing it. So it must have been great. I was actually reminded of it the other day too, because a memory popped up on Facebook, and I don't know how the picture got in there, but I was like, oh, look, it was the first time I was pregnant. I showed my husband, I said, I was pregnant before you.
That's right.
He didn't think it was as adorable as I did.
It was all about having a baby.
Yeah.
It's all about having a baby.
But yeah, it wasn't a farce, but it did have moments of like that, the doors and it's all coming back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I liked it because, you know, to me, scripts are safer in that there's a lot of rehearsal and there's a certain expectation and you have a clear character. But you know, I like the improv because it keeps it fresh, because, you know, it's boring to do the same show over and over again. So when you can dial into what's going to possibly be changing, that's hopefully allowed. But, you know, but that's what makes it fun. I don't know. I enjoyed that show a lot, though.
So, when you are working a show, not an improv show, just any production, and you are working with somebody who is not comfortable in the essence of improv. I'm not talking about going off script and playing around at a rehearsal and experimenting, but just the essence of improv, the feeling that things do change, things will change. You need to listen to each other to get some kind of reality going in a situation. And you're working with somebody who is not comfortable with that. Do you have any tricks? Because I know all of you are very comfortable with that kind of a feeling. Do you have any tricks to kind of bring them out of themselves? Loosen them up?
Jera, you must have tricks for this.
I have been guilty of slapping people. I'm not joking.
Oh, shit.
Because within the context of what we were doing, it wasn't like this was a love scene and I slapped the heck out of somebody. But it was, you know, an argument, like, or between two characters, and I could tell that they were going off in their own head, and I just, like, a small little slap was enough to realize, okay, we're right here, you and me, we're back to this. I'm not always the most fun person to work with, so I will add that as a caveat. But
I in no way condone physically abusing your fellow.
right.
Slap them.
But other things I have done that do not involve violence have been, yeah, there's a few, guys. There have been things like personally changing the space relations, because that alone, on a subconscious level, changes people. Even if they're in their own head, if I get 2 feet closer to you, you're going to do something different. Or if I stand 5 feet back. So those little tricks work at times when trying to adjust the mood or refocus what your partner's doing.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that comes into the that whole status thing too.
Yeah.
Just
but slapping works too.
Slapping would definitely.
Right.
How about you, Joe? Do you often slap your students?
No. Although there's plenty of times I've wanted to. Yeah. No, I think for me, again, it's all about going back to the context of what you're doing. So when I do use improv, it's like I've had a couple students who are really taking this, you know, their character seriously, but they're just not finding it or not relating it, or it's outside of their comfort zone. And you know, just kind of saying, okay, well, what would they do in this situation? What would they do in that situation? Okay, now say that line to this person. You know, just trying to get them out of their head and into their body, get the character, you know, start actually embodying the character, which is hard. I mean, I've done some tricky shows with high school students. Yeah. You know, I mean, in the Heights and Les Mis are not shows that high schoolers are necessarily built for. But my whole thing with them is that if you're not pushing them, if you're not trying to raise the bar every time you do a show, it stagnates. And so for me, it's like, well, then you have to treat them like professional actors, and you have to give them tools to work around whatever their blocks are. And improv does very much help with that.
I do see Katie very nicely used the little electronic raise a hand thing. I love that. And I'm going to have you ask your question, but I wanted to just explain. Jared just ran away for a moment. He's back now because he typed in, "My dog just ran off with a pacifier," which in improv would be a great opening line.
It would be.
Sir, it didn't happen.
Yes, Katie, what's your question?
Oh, I don't know if it was a question. I was just going to share that when my kids were young, I used to take them to comedy sports all the time and loved it. It was so much fun. And then once they became like 16 or 17, I took them to the Groundlings. And we would do that maybe twice a year around Christmas and then my birthday. So last year for Christmas, they gave me 6 weeks of a Groundlings class. And I don't have a lot of improv experience. And it was so much fun. And one thing that I hope, hopefully several things, but he would time us and he would keep us going for over 3 minutes because you tend to kind of go to your comfort zone on your different characters that you know. And he would keep you longer than 3 minutes because then new ideas would come up. And that was super fascinating for me. It was such a great experience. It was Craig Watson was the teacher, and I loved it. But so probably maybe I saw you guys in comedy sports.
So what was the big lesson that you walked away with?
Probably listening skills, listening to my scene partner and sharing. I'm not the type that's going to dominate anyway. I'd rather have a scene partner that would. And I'm shy. So by the end of the 6 weeks, I felt a lot more comfortable. I was definitely by far like the oldest by 30 years. And I was cracking everyone up. So that felt really good. I think it was good for my confidence. That 3 minutes longer, keep going when you're uncomfortable, when you want it to stop, and the new things that come up was fantastic. So, and then lots of memory exercises for warm up, which is always good for the brain, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that reminds me, we would do a game that Joe mentioned earlier called Rant, and it basically very simple. You get up there, you say, "You know what I hate," and you start just ranting about something. And then when somebody else comes up with hearing something in what you have been ranting about that reminds them of something that they can rant about, they interrupt you. Mm-hmm. And the absolute worst thing about rant is having no one interrupt you. It was just an awful feeling. And yeah, so going on for more than 3 minutes, I can feel that. My gut. Just being able to keep talking, because that was the rule. You had to keep talking until someone interrupted you. You could not stop. And
Did that bring a lot of negativity, though?
Yeah, absolutely. It was great.
See, we always looked at it as it purging the negativity before we started. Like we got it all the frustration out there, and then you didn't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we had rules. You could not rant about each other. Although as far as I remember, I think Chera found some clever ways around that rule. He wouldn't rant about it. He'd just walk over and slap you. But you had to rant about outside things, and they're normally things that everyone kind of shares the same frustration with in society, so that was not a big thing. And the connections were where the comedy came in, not the ranting itself, but the objects that somebody would talk about that would remind somebody of something else. That's where the laughs would come in.
And you didn't really have to hate whatever you were ranting
No,
about.
God,
Like it would be like, what do you hate? Pencils. Like, why are we using pencils in 2020? And you just go off on that until somebody said, you know, something else, and you take that and you go in your own direction with it.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, we had some, what was your favorite game?
What was my favorite game?
That's for anyone.
Oh, okay. Well, one
Okay.
thing he would not, my class started on January like 6th or 10th in the beginning in January. And he said, we are not to make any jokes about COVID. I thought that was kind of interesting. And, you know, and it hadn't gotten bad yet, but,
Oh, that is interesting.
mm-hmm. For me, one of my favorite improvs, it was a gal and I, and we were supposed to be two comedians in a prison, and they are about to experience the death penalty. And then the audience got to participate, and that was super fun.
Wow. That's a kicker. Erin, did you have a favorite game?
I to be honest with you, I don't remember a lot of them offhand, so. I loved them all. They were all fantastic.
Oh, that's good, Erin. Yeah, they were. No, some were really awful.
No, I know. I can't remember the names of a lot of them. I'm going to keep thinking on it. I just don't remember.
Okay.
My favorite is always, and I loved it when, can you hear me?
Yeah, we see.
Okay, because your internet is unstable.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
across
I
my
get
screen.
that. Yeah.
I especially when I got to do it with Greg, and it continues to be one of my favorites when my students do it, is Complaint Department. I absolutely love.
You stole mine, Hogan.
That was a good one.
Well, but I think of course it's ours because the two of us had so much fun with it. And
Yeah.
But if you don't know what Complaint Department is, it's a guessing game, and the person is returning something, but they don't know what they're returning, and the person working customer service has to give clues to get them to explain what they're returning, and like you just come up with crazy stuff. And when you're working with high school students, the number of times I returned myself because they're like, oh, it'll be funny to have Mr. Hogan return it. Yeah, Mr. Hogan. So yeah, I think that's just, it's such a ridiculous fun, you know, you walk in with something heavy and the thing was a book, you know, it takes everything to 11. I just love that game.
Good one. Jared, did you have a favorite?
Along the lines of guessing games, I liked Press Conference.
You want to explain that one?
Press Conference was where we would all play reporters, and there was one person who had no idea who they were. And so we would ask questions, and these questions were clues meant to help inform the conference speaker what celebrity they might be or historical figure. And I thought that was very fun, entertaining in terms of being a game that a lot of people could share together.
Yes, absolutely. I love those. Those are just basically, yeah, the guessing games are like the audience is getting a chance to come into a party and watch a bunch of friends play games with each other.
Yeah.
Which is, it's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. And particularly if you start failing at it.
Oh, yeah.
That's when they're truly funny, is when you are totally off base. Because the audience is in on the joke.
Yeah. One of the things I love watching the most, if it's done well, and it can be done very poorly, but I love movie guys. It's where you have two people who are doing like a movie review show, and Jarrell was always wonderful at this. I loved the characters that he would come up with to review these shows, and so you basically talk about a scene at the beginning, middle, and end of this movie that you're reviewing. You get a title from the audience, and you have 3 to 5 actors that are playing those scenes out. You know, let's take a look at the clip, and then there's this beautiful back and forth between what the reviewers set up and what the actors do. And then when they come back, it's basically like this passing the turn of the storytelling. And it's such a great game because you have the story between the two people who are reviewing it. And then you have the actual movie, and it's just a really good storytelling game.
On the same line as that was what, slideshow? Was it slideshow?
Yeah, slideshow.
People showing slides of a vacation or something to that effect, and then the other people in the group were part of those slides. They would come out and pose. It was a lot of fun.
Real quick, Greg,
yeah.
Just one, because this is how necessity is the mother of invention. When I left my last school, the improv team was still trying to come up with ways to perform. And so they did a version of slideshow where they would take a presentation from online and they would try and present to it. Like that was their, yeah, like, so they would take like, you know, some sort of scientific presentation that has a bunch of like Google slides, and they'd play the slides and they'd narrate over it.
That's
and
clever.
This they came up with on their own, and it you know, for trying to figure out how to do improv over Zoom, like it was, I thought, a really cool idea, especially since they have to do the presentations for school all the time anyway, that it's something that they could kind of relate to.
I love that. That is really, really cool. So we're getting near the end of this, and I want to give everyone an opportunity, because getting into an improv group is a limited experience. I mean, yes, you can do it, and probably pretty much anyone could get into one. Maybe not now, but at some point in the future, in some mystical future, when we can actually do theater again, you can do that. But I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to just talk a little bit about how improv has made you a better person. And Joe, you're lit up, so I'm going to let you go first.
Lit up?
Yeah.
Your
He means you're drunk as hell.
How does it make me a better performer or theater person? Well, I mean, we've kind of covered the topics. It forces you to trust the people you're on stage with, and it teaches you to go with the flow. And I think that especially if you come into theater to control things, which I don't think is an uncommon reason to get into theater, I think it helps you let go of some of that, because you're working with somebody that you have to, that chemistry has to be there in an improv group. You have to trust the people you're on stage with, because if you don't, you're going to get that fear every time you go on stage. And even when you go up on lines in a show, that improv of, I know I can get out of this because I've done it before, it really helps you just kind of put away some of the anxiety and just be in the moment.
Cool. Erin?
No, yeah. Oh, I had a deep, profound thought and it just flew out of my head. No, it's. Oh, get back to me. It was really deep.
Okay.
I'll jump in.
Start digging.
All right. So, as Erin's translator, this is what she said. Improv has affected my life in a multitude of surprising ways, from things like job interviews to how to navigate everyday life conversations with people. I find that listening with intent is very important in those circumstances, and developing a further narrative of what you want to say or what's going on, rather than stopping dead in its tracks the flow of what a conversation may be, or the general overall world of what's happening around you. Lastly, I think it's great and it's a beautiful tool to have when you're doing theater in general. For example, I was doing a production of The Seagull once where around Act 3, one of the actors developed a violent case of the stomach flu and had to leave the show, like literally left the show at that moment. And so we were tasked with finding a way to make the seagull work without, I believe it was Trigorin, and yet still keep the important information and still create the realities and relationships that existed with everyone else. So without saying a word, we all jumped into it and began to sort of pull and push until we managed to get the exact tone of what was normally being said throughout that piece. And all the while, I could hear him in this black box theater retching. It was terrible.
Thank you for adding that last bit.
You're welcome.
Speaking more about like in everyday life,
But not speaking about retching.
less about retching, which does happen in everyday life. No, improv.
Do you have a problem? Do you want to talk about it, Aaron?
No.
Okay.
Talk about it in improv. No, I think improv, theater in general, job interview, yes, 100%. You don't get jolted or thrown off guard by normal questions, by the stupid questions people think are great job interview questions to catch you off guard and how you really feel and how you'll really react. You've got those down. But for me, my career somehow has ended always being in sales. And I think one of my strengths is being able to read a room. And I think improv has helped me with that a lot, because with a scripted play, it goes on as planned for the most part. And some days you get a lot of applause. Other days you can tell it just was not for them. But in improv, you can cater what you're doing, you know, kind of to who's in the room and stuff. So you can kind of figure out what's working, what's not, and kind of go in that direction. You know, these are the jokes that are hitting or the kind of scenes that are working. And I've found that being able to do that in work, in personal life, especially right now as a newish mother, I'm finding myself in a lot of situations that my, you know, Erin by herself would never be in. And now I'm surrounded by different adults that I have to be around because I have children and so do they. You know, I know which kind of Erin I can turn on and which doesn't work in that situation. But no, improv, I mean, it's just, it keeps you on your toes. You, as a personality thing I have is, and I'm sometimes have to remember 2 ears, 1 mouth. It's helped me with that, is I you know, listen, and I tend to step on other people when they're talking, and it actually, that was the hardest lesson to learn with improv, and I often have to remind myself of that in my everyday life.
2 ears, 1 mouth. I like that.
Yeah.
I know, I'm totally stealing that. That's awesome.
That is
Except
good.
for the fact that it was my husband who said it to me.
Oh.
That's okay.
He wasn't wrong, but yeah, 2 ears, Erin, 1 mouth.
He's a brave man.
That's what my mom told him. You're special.
So, I wanted to close this out tonight with thank you all, first of all, and it's been a blast seeing the three of you, especially. I've missed you.
I missed you guys too.
And
Yes.
you do the one thing that we really haven't mentioned tonight is the fact that doing improv with each other, you develop some very, very deep and lasting friendships. And that goes on. I mean, just popping in here tonight, it's like we're all talking the way we would talk incessantly instead of actually working on a stage. So thank you guys for being here. I love you, and this was fun. Hope it was enlightening to some extent. And thanks for being here. Next week, God knows what we'll be doing. But come on back. Check in every now and then. It's always the same code. You just click in. Save that link. Come back. And we'll be talking about some other theater stuff that really, we're just really hungry for theater right now. Let's face it, that's the only purpose for these things. So, Eric, Katie, by the way, Jara, Aaron, Joe, Katie and Eric have been like at almost every one of these roundtables. So those two are just amazing. So thank you for being here again. And I want to be where you are.
I miss theater.
Katie.
That's
That looks
why
really
I miss theater.
Pretty. I know. It's been nuts. I've got a moth right here.
Oh, what are you doing?
Okay.
I'm just revisiting Marvin. Oh,
He's back.
He's back. Anyway, love you all. Take care of yourselves. Thanks,
Thank you,
guys,
Greg.
for being
Thanks,
here.
guys.
Talk to you all later.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.